Fantastic. Welcome to the Space Prize Speaker Series, Episode 7. It is June 8th, 2022. We're here today with Chris Boshuizen, our guest speaker. We're very excited about hearing about his spectacularly varied career trajectory. And I'm excited to be joined again by Bailey Burns as our guest host. And we've got a lot in store for you guys right now. So I'll take a few minutes to say a few words about Space Prize, and then we'll dive into the interview, followed by the Q&A. So I'm Mark Wagner. I'm the president of the Space Prize Foundation. And as I said, I'm going to introduce to you the work that Space Prize is doing before introducing our guest host, Bailey Burns, and our guest speaker, Chris Boshuizen. Space Prize just completed the very first Space Prize contest, the Space Prize Challenge New York City. This was focused on public high schools in New York City and specifically focused on young women in those schools. The mission of Space Prize is to encourage young women to pursue STEAM education and to explore careers in the space industry. Thus, the focus of this speaker series is on the many various jobs available in the industry and the often unusual ways that people might make their way to those jobs. So the girls involved in this contest in New York did a essay contest at their campus in January. In February, the finalists were invited to participate in a video contest. Most of the judging took place in March. And at the end of the March, we actually had all 25 finalists participate in a simulated mission to Mars at the Challenger Center right there in Manhattan. So that was a great experience for all the finalists. We also had a Yuri's Night celebration right there in Manhattan for them as well. The week they went to the Challenger Center, they also got all of their faces up on a massive billboard in Times Square, which, as you can imagine, was a big deal for New York City students, to the point where they were bringing their grandparents into town to see them, and everybody made sure that they could get out there and get pictures and everything with them. You can see some of the girls there in the lower right, taking pictures of the sign when it had their pictures on it, their faces on it. 4 of the winners got to go to Space Camp's new leadership program, Space Camp Lift. So they got to travel down to Huntsville, Alabama for a 3-day weekend and be a part of that, which for some of them was the first time traveling on a plane. So also a very cool experience. And the final 5 winners got to fly on a 0G flight just last weekend with Star Trek's Denise Crosby and our very own Kim Masharia, our executive director, who hosted last week's episode. So it was a fantastic experience. We're going to be sharing more of it over the coming days. A really fantastic interview with Dan Deavy from Gaze in Space, who arranged for Denise to be there with the girls. And they were all just so eloquent afterwards. So looking forward to sharing more of that with you over time. If you want to see what else we're up to at Space Prize, it's spaceprize.org. Some of the things that we've got coming right now are a second Space Prize challenge, this one in Paris, focused on a very special aviation-based school there. Again, a public high school, but focused on aviation, named after a French aviation pioneer, Hélène Boucher, who broke all kinds of records in the 1920s. So she's a great inspiration for the program as well. We also are releasing later this month the first few chapters of our space education curriculum, with the rest to follow by the end of the summer. So wanted to make sure that anybody who's watching this, particularly teachers and students and educators, that you're aware this is coming. And the other sort of educational element that we're participating in right now is this speaker series. So it's really turned into something special. We do have astronauts, engineers, scientists, some people who are all 3, like today's guest. He's an entrepreneur. So we've got the designers, lawyers, historians, many more folks working in various roles in the space industry coming over the next several months. So we're booked now through March 2023. So keep coming back most weeks on Wednesday at 4 p.m. Pacific time, and you can figure that out in your time zone. After the live episodes, the recordings are posted on our YouTube channel as well. So for those of you who are here, we have a small group today, which is great. We can be really flexible, but a few norms do participate in the chat. We definitely want to hear from you, and I'll try to encourage that once we get rolling here. Feel free to use the raise hand feature if you've got something to say at any point during the interview. With a small enough group like this too, if we don't notice you, just speak right up, unmute, and you know, say that you've got a question or you've got something to share. And if it comes to it, if you've got something that you want to show us, we'll also invite you to share screen with us. If you do use the help feature, that will send me a message, but you can also just use the chat feature and send me a message there. Now, from time to time, we may leave wait time between questions and answers. Now, this may be to allow our guest speaker to say a bit more on the subject. It may be to allow you guys to interject with a new question. But just know that if there are slight pauses, that this is being done remote, and it is by design so that everybody gets to be heard and we're not rushing along. That being said, I want to introduce our guest host, Bailey Burns. Bailey's an aerospace systems engineer at Paragon Space Development Corporation, which just sounds super exciting to me. Where she focuses on life support systems. They are actually a spacesuit company now too as well, so that's pretty fantastic. She has her BS in mechanical engineering and also a master's in space resources. She has been an analog astronaut, as you can see, at high seas, where she spent 2 weeks in a simulated moon mission. She is also a Space Kind graduate and TA. She's in the level 3. I'm lucky enough to be in level 3 with her right now. And she is also, of course, passionate about STEM education and outreach, and really fantastic to have her here talking with students and teachers, or representing students and teachers, I should say. And in her free time, as you may have gathered from her online handle, she is also a martial artist. She's into scuba and snowboarding and other adventures as well. But as a amateur martial artist myself, I'm particularly impressed with Bailey's black belts. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Bailey, and she'll be leading the interview with Chris.
Great, thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. And I'm so excited to be introducing Dr. Chris Boshuizen today. For those of you that don't know, you guys are in for a treat. Just so you know, I actually got to listen to Chris talk last week, and then I was like, oh, this is perfect. I did my research for this week that way. So basically, Dr. Boshuizen, or Chris, should we call you Chris? Dr. Chrispy? What do you prefer?
Chris is perfect.
Chris, okay. So Chris is from Australia, and he has his PhD in physics from the University of Sydney, and then he worked at NASA Ames Research Center, and then went on to work, or to co-found Planet Labs, which was one of the coolest jobs, I think, or the coolest innovations to come from the private space industry, just because of all the amazing things that Planet does. And one of my favorite things is just the type of people Planet employs. So Chris, thanks for setting that up for cool people to do cool space things. Specifically focusing on Planet Labs focuses on nanosatellites in commercial capacity to reduce the cost of lifting payloads. And then the coolest thing is that Dr. Chris Boshuizen is also astronaut Chris Boshuizen. He flew on Blue Origin, I guess that was quite a few months ago, but I'm sure the experience is still very vivid. And then, as I mentioned, he is a DJ, Dr. Chrispy. I was fortunate enough to hear him at Yuri's Night LA this year. Not only is he good at floating in 0G, but he's good at music as well. So that's a lot to unpack. So Chris, thank you for joining us. Anything I left out that you want to add in?
No, thanks, Bailey. Really appreciate it. I do have a question for you, though, before we start. Can you solve a Rubik's Cube?
Of course. I was telling Mark, I always have one with me.
Oh, I actually don't know how to do that. I'd love to learn sometime. It's one of the things I've never figured out.
I'll teach you, don't worry.
Wait, Bailey, one with you?
Huh?
One with you?
Oh yeah, no, I always have multiple with me just in case I need them on backup.
Awesome, that is so cool.
So, Chris, let's see where to start. I think I gave a pretty decent overview of your background, which is insanely complex, but is there anything like an overview of your career and how you got to where you are and how you carved out that path?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I sort of, when I went to space, I was trying to reflect on, like, how did I get there? And it was kind of having a single track mind, really, and just like making up my mind very early on what I wanted to do. And then just sticking with it. I remember I got some good advice from someone when I was in an undergraduate student. They said, you should be able to make like complex decisions of things like, what do I want for lunch? Like a complex decision is, do I want a sandwich? If I want a sandwich, do I want whole wheat or white? Do I want peanut butter and jelly, or do I want salami? Do I want mustard or ketchup? And so our life is made up of all of the small events that we fill up in our day. But the really big things like, do I want to go to space? You should be able to make that decision in a heartbeat. And I think there are people on this call who have made that decision. And there are people who maybe are thinking about it, or that's not for them, and that's totally fine too. But to go or not go, that's, a big decision. And so what they said was, big decisions you should be able to make instantly. If someone said to you, would you want to work at NASA? And if we have a job for you starting Monday, and can you say yes or no that? And in my case, I did, because I already knew that was what I want to do. So when that job offer showed up, of course, I didn't even have to think about it. Whereas, I agonize over what I want to eat for dinner tonight. And so I think that's the whole story, is I just made up my mind I was going to do it. And then that allowed me to relax a little bit. And it took me 27 years from my first attempt to go to space to actually get there. But I didn't really stress out in that time. I just kept chugging along.
Wow. Well, there are a lot of people here that I'm sure also have made up their minds they want to go to space. And as you mentioned, you're going on 20 years of like waiting for that day. So what was that? First of all, what was the waiting period like? And then second of all, what was it like to finally accomplish that?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of surreal to actually go, because, if you'd asked me in January of last year, would I go to space in 2021? I would have said no. Like, I had no idea that all of these commercial space companies were actually going to start lifting people off into space in 2021. It was crazy. So it kind of came out of nowhere as well. I thought it'd be a few more years. So I was willing to wait. But yeah, I just, one of the things, like, you mentioned that I'm Australian. That's important because Australia doesn't have a space agency. So I didn't go to space camp when I was a kid. I'm jealous of everyone on this call that's been to space camp, or the young women that get to go. Because we didn't have it in Australia. There's no NASA. And when I grew up, there was no space agency or space industry really. So a lot of my career was just about trying to think what to do. Like, I know what the goal, I know what success feels like, but what should I do? What's the degree I get? Where do I work? And, had a lot of false starts and different attempts. And they're all fun and learning experiences. And they all kind of incrementally got me to the end. But yeah, it's a lot of like just kind of feeling out in the dark. If you know the destination, then you just keep trying ideas.
Yeah, I like that. So did you kind of always have that faith that you would find your way into space? Like, was there ever a moment you're like, I'm never going to make it? Like,
no, I don't think so. One of my mental defects is I can quite convincingly believe unrealistic things and continue to believe them to be true. And then if you're patient, one day they become true. So I never really doubted it. You know what I mean? It just, I kind of feel like, to me, space is natural. It's like, just like walking outside. I'm allowed to walk outside, right? I think, well, not during COVID, we couldn't, right? But like, it's right there. I could see it. And so to me, it just feels natural. So I never doubted it.
Chris, oh, sorry, Bailey. Chris,
no,
your story started in Australia, and we have a really fantastic space educator from Australia under One Giant Leap here, but I think it's Jackie. And she's wondering where you're from.
Oh, hey. So I was born in Sydney, and I, at about age 5, moved to Tumbarumba in the Riverina in New South Wales. And I grew up and I did high school all the way from K through 12 in Tumbarumba. So that's for the folks who aren't from Australia, that's an Indigenous Australian town name. And it means the sound of the Valley of Echoes, basically. It's onomatopoeia for echo in a big valley. So it's kind of a cool place to grow up, very rural, but I had really crystal clear, night skies there. And I remember seeing the stars, and I got a telescope when I was 10 or 12, and I spent a long time stargazing. And then, ultimately went to Sydney University for school.
Hi, Chris. Nice to meet you virtually. We have been emailed through Ron. I've been to Space Camp 16 times, so I'm more than happy to meet you there with a batch of Aussies, and you can come and say good day and do all of that. I actually want to build something like that here, so we should talk about that. But it's great to, I'm so proud of you. It's great to have somebody that we can direct our kids to and go, we have an Aussie, a young person in the new space industry. So we are, as a whole country, we're so proud that you've been to space, and it's just wonderful. So thank you for everything, because you're inspiring the next generations. It's just brilliant.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. And I actually, to be honest, I'm just kind of slapping myself right now because I didn't realize that I could still go to space camp. So if it's not totally too late, I would love to go to space camp.
I think that's probably all Chris heard from all that. He's like, wait, I can go to space camp.
Chris, I've helped. I've been going to space camp since 2007, and I've helped kids over here get fundraise and get grants about $800,000 worth to get kids that really want to go, who have no means to get there, to help them get there. So we can take that conversation offline, but wouldn't it be brilliant for you to meet us there and then participate with us? It would just be brilliant.
I would love that. That would be amazing.
Oh, what, like the power of the connection from space guys. So thanks for that, Mark, putting those two people together. I like Liam's follow-on question from this, just being from Australia, being one of those representatives. Liam asked, now that Australia does have a space agency, how might that change the pathway for other Australians to put themselves on a pathway / future like you have experienced? So what are your thoughts there, Chris?
Yeah, I'm actually curious about that, because I kind of had to go overseas to get anything done, because one of the most important things was community. And so I think my first ever trip to America was to a space conference, and I met 200 other space enthusiasts, and I got hooked with that community. I kind of found my family, which is, kind of the people on this call. And that was how I got involved in stuff. But I think now a lot of that you can actually do in Australia. So I would just encourage Australians to get together and, put your brains together and think what you can change about the industry. What would you do if you were king for a day and you could build a satellite or a space program your way, and then just do it? I think you can. Yeah.
I think, and then you just do it is kind of the definition for your career. Honestly, you're just like, well, I'm just going to go do it myself. So can you talk about how you founded Planet Lab and how all that went down?
Yeah. So we, because the whole story really is that I wanted to go to space and I didn't know how I was ever going to do that. And one of the things I recognized was that everything was just too expensive. And so, so a bunch of friends and I, in the spirit of what I just said, we got together and were like, how do we make space cheaper? Because if it just costs less, we could do more. If satellites were cheaper, we could launch more of them. If rockets were cheaper, we could launch more stuff into space. If space stations were cheaper, we could actually build that space station we all want. So we kind of tried to work on ways to get the cost down. And one of the things we did was launch a phone into space. So we actually put an Android phone into orbit as a free-flying satellite, actually into orbit, and ran a week-long mission where we ran the phone, wrote an app for the phone, and took photos of the Earth and sent it back to the ground over a radio. And so that was like the cheapest satellite ever put in space. It was a $500 satellite. And so that was kind of the game changer. But there's that saying, with all new ideas, I think exactly what it's like. But first they laugh at you, and then later on they want to join you. So this is a great example. We put a phone in space, and we suddenly believed we could do something really powerful and magic with that. So we went to NASA and said, hey, we've got this cool new approach to space. We could chop a couple of zeros off the prices of some of your missions. And they kind of laughed us out of the room because they said it wasn't credible. And that was the moment where we're like, wow, okay, they don't believe us. Well, we still believe us. So we're going to leave and do it ourselves. And so Planet was the result of that.
Yeah, I think that commitment to just believing, like you said, it was, I don't remember what you said, but it was perfectly worded. Your just belief that it's going to happen. I think that's what's really carried through everything you've done. What were some of the obstacles or challenges in your career that you faced, other than obviously people laughing you out of the room, but what else do you have there? And what tips do you have to overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, big one was I actually had a motorcycle accident when I was in uni. And I remember my grades, I had the darkest day of my academic career was when I got a paper back, and in Australia, everything's graded as a percentage. So I got a paper back, or final year exam actually, that was 49%. And that's a fail in Australia. So I was like, oh, this is really bad. So I went to the professor and I said, hey, is there anything you can do? So he went and looked at my paper and he recounted it. And he's like, oh, I missed one actually. It's 50. So he said 50.0, you pass, don't come back. And so that, would happen because I'd had this motorcycle accident and was just really struggling to keep up. And so on that moment, hitting kind of rock bottom there, I was like, you know what, I really need to do something about this. And so I actually made a fake copy of my university's diploma, and I put on it graduating year, first class honors, which is like, coming first basically. Bachelor's certificate for your degree, printed it out, put a fake signature on there for the chancellor and the dean, laminated it, framed it, put it on the wall in front of me, and looked at that. And then I ended up graduating with, 4-year degree with first class honors with high distinction, which is the highest grade. And so I went from this roller coaster of hitting the bottom all the way to the top. And frankly, I wouldn't have been able to do any of the things that I have done if I hadn't have fixed that issue and really got a grip on my studies. And so I just, having a vision and just kind of looking at that every day, it reminded me, don't play computer games, just really get this degree and focus on that because it's important for what I want to do next. So that was probably the biggest barrier. And then a lot of, you mentioned my sort of stubbornness, I don't know if that was the word you used, but that comes from that, where I learned to just be persistent and keep working on stuff. And having a temporary disability is a great way to learn to sort of be self-reliant and to keep pushing on stuff. So.
Yeah, I remember you talked about that last week. Do you want to speak to that experience at all a little bit more? Because it's something I didn't know about you. So I don't know if you want to share a little.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's just, I guess we all have this vision of a view of NASA astronauts as these pristine human beings. There's another project that I really admire called Astro Access, where they are helping take people with disabilities up on zero-G rides and hopefully one day on suborbital and orbital flights. Actually, orbital space is a great place for people with disabilities because gravity doesn't matter. So I think that's like a fantastic project. But that's kind of trying to push back on this view that people in space are these perfect specimens of humanity. And in fact, I didn't realize this, but I found there's an online document that lists all of the major issues that career astronauts at NASA have experienced. Because if you're a NASA astronaut, sometimes the training program could be 10 years before you fly. So people break bones, they have car accidents, they need hip replacements, knee replacements, break a shoulder. And so they're not as perfect as we thought, as we often think. And I had always viewed breaking my legs as a way that would disqualify me from ever going to NASA and being a career NASA astronaut. And so part of what I was trying to do was find a plan B, thinking that door was closed for that reason. The other one was also I'm colorblind, so they probably wouldn't admit me anyway. They don't want me on the shuttle and they say push the green button and I push the red one. So you don't want me as a pilot on your shuttle. So there was a couple of things where I felt like I really probably aren't ever going to make it as a NASA astronaut, so I should have a plan B, and the plan B worked. So
yeah, I definitely understand that, of just like NASA astronaut seems almost untouchable, right? Like very few people get that. So many of us want to go to space, but so few of us would that path. And you guys opening up Planet and staying involved with Blue Origin to just find your different way. Like I said, you carved your own way into space. I think that's really awesome. Can you tell me a little bit more about Planet specifically and how that's going to be, I don't know, just kind of revolutionizing how we view space and that vision there?
Yeah, so I'd mentioned this idea of putting a phone in space. So if a satellite costs $500, it kind of allows you to do some magical things. So one is, if it's that cheap, you shouldn't be afraid to lose it. If your satellite is $1 billion and you break it, it's a bad day. If you have a $500 satellite, maybe it's not so bad. And that also means you can launch lots of them. So for the price of one normal satellite, maybe you could launch 100 cheaper satellites. So Planet was kind of based on that idea of like safety in numbers and being able to launch a large number of satellites. And that had a lot of really cool consequences. One, which was that launching 100 satellites allows us to map the whole world every day. Most satellites, if you've got one sort of like, Earth observing satellite with an optical camera on it, you have to choose what picture you want to take. And so in the past, satellites would fly over a region and they'd be like, oh, we need that photo of that conflict zone. So the satellite would point over, take that picture. But when it's doing that, it can't take any other pictures. And so we missed a lot of stuff that was happening on the planet. And I think most people think because of Google Maps, we used to have hundreds of satellites. Well, actually, we didn't. But once we got there, we were able to not have to pick and choose anymore. We could take every photo every day. And so Planet right now maps the whole world every day, all of the land area of the planet. And we have a stack of images for every location now going back about 9 years. So you could make an animation of one point on the ground and how it's changed, which is really important for monitoring things like the environment, the ice caps, deforestation, the rising sea levels, the changing of our coasts, the changing of urban environments. All of those things can be seen from space, and we can play them back in real time and see what's happening.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of my favorite things about Planet is that it is about our planet, right? Like monitoring all these things in our planet. Can you expand a little bit more on the like saving Earth or monitoring Earth and stuff like that, and kind of that vision that you see for the future of Planet, like, the direction that company is headed?
Yeah, in the past, when satellite images were a scarce resource, you'd often hear about things too late to ever do anything about it. So I remember, quite frequently, actually, NASA will publish a study on the receding of the ice caps. And this study the news would come out in 2022, but the study would be done in 2021, and it would be from data from 2018 through 2020. So by the time that got to the news, it's about 4 years. So what are we going to do about it other than cry? We can't really do anything about it because it's already happened and it's in the past. And so by mapping the whole world every day, we get to see stuff happen, like blow by blow, what's happening. If we change something about our environment, how does the local ecosystem respond? Even on positive projects like restoring areas, if we want to restore a wetland on a coastline, we can actually see what our actions have done. And, did the grass come back? Did the sand recede? Did the animals start nesting there again and start inhabiting that ecosystem? So if you can see things happening on a daily basis, you can actually take control. And so we don't have to just feel sorry about the damage or the consequences or the changes of our planet. We can actually be part of stewarding the planet. And I think that's what really excited us about the idea of Planet, was that we could not just get the data, but we could take action based on it and become good stewards of our planet. And that's really what it's about.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And as mentioned, we have plenty of students online. So let's say someone really wants to get into that line of work. What kind of like degrees or at-home projects, that kind of stuff, would you be looking for to help with that initiative?
Well, the most important thing probably for any career in the future is learning to code. And I'd say learning to code in Python in particular. And so Planet publishes a lot of its data, but these days, as a modern career in Earth observation, you don't just look, you don't print out a map and you look at it, you write code to compare them. So one of the things you can do with Planet's data is take an image of today and an image of yesterday and take the difference between the two. And that way you can create an automatic map of things that changed. You can make the pixels red where something on the ground changed, and you can ignore the rest. So that on the entire planet, that helps you search around and go, what changed today? And so that's done in code. And so I think the biggest thing for anyone in any career really is learning to code. I think coding is the literacy, it's as important as learning to read and write for future careers. And certainly, if imaging, a lot of it is code-based. Other than that, I'd say going to somewhere like a nonprofit or something that is actually using these images in its day-to-day work and getting involved with understanding how that cycle works that I described, how there's a picture, we can drive out into the forest, we can have a look what happened, we can fix it, we can come back, we can look at the image again next month. So just finding some ways, maybe on a volunteer basis, to get become part of that stewardship cycle. I think that's a great way to start.
Yeah, both of those things. I definitely hear that. And you make me feel a little guilty because I stopped trying to learn Python. So maybe I should get back on that train. That one was hard. All right. So also feel free anyone to ask questions from the audience. I'm going to throw that out there again. But I really want to learn more about your suborbital flight. What was the best part? What were the highlights? But also, was there anything that kind of surprised you from that experience?
Yeah, so it's full of surprises, and I think almost in a way it's a little bit unnatural. Like human beings, even though I said it, I gave that analogy of like outdoors being natural and space being natural. I did realize when I went up there that was a little bit of theoretical kind of thinking, and that in fact human beings aren't evolved to go to space. And when I was up there, my brain kind of overloaded in a way. It was like, I don't know what I'm looking at. Like I've seen thousands of pictures of space before, and this is more freaky than I ever was told. And there's a couple of things, like the sun is really bright. They don't prepare you for that because the sun is above the atmosphere. The atmosphere really attenuates the sun. And if you live in a northern climate with a lot of clouds or just a low sun angle, you've never seen the sun in full brightness. And unless you're watching an episode of Game of Thrones where they're in the south and they've turned the color of the TV all the way to bright, right? That's kind of what it looks like. It's so bright, and the colors of the atmosphere, because again, you're not seeing the sunlight passing through, scattering blue light all around. You're seeing the blue light reflected straight back into your eye like a laser. And so the atmosphere is super bright and the sun is super bright. And then because of the contrast, space is so black. It's like the blackest thing I've ever seen. And so it's just like stimulus overload in a way. And I remember for the first 2 minutes, my brain was just freaking out, going, I don't even know what I'm looking at.
Wow. So I remember you talking about that before, where you're just like, you couldn't even fathom it. You couldn't even, like, your brain couldn't put the pieces together. Is that what happened? Like,
yeah, I also, because I was trying to be a little bit clever, I always overthink things. And I was like, oh, okay. That saying in space, there's no up in space. So I was like, okay, I'll flip upside down, or because there's no up space, I'll just rotate and I'll make the Earth be there. So I had the Earth above me and blackness below me. And that looked so unlike what we normally see. I look out of the window, the Earth is always down there, ground is always down, right? And so having ground be up, I think really confused my brain and made me just go, I couldn't even recognize it as the ground or a planet. Just like I saw a black thing and I saw an orangey blue thing, and orange because we're in West Texas, right? So the ground is very, very like pale orange, and to my colorblind eyes. And then space is blue. Oh, the atmosphere is blue and space is black. So just there was this thing that I was like, I don't know what that is. It's a thing. It's a bowl. It's an orange bowl with a blue line and black. And my brain's like, I don't know. So,
that's it. And then you said after about 2 minutes, it started being like, oh, okay, no, I recognize that. I can see what I'm looking at now.
Yeah, I took a break. We went and did a little group shot, and then I came back, and then I flipped down. So then Earth was back in the accustomed position. And then I was like, oh, okay, now I see it. Trees, mountains, hills, clouds, and I could suddenly see details again. But yeah. I see Mac asked a question. Was there light in the spacecraft? I think it was mostly sunlight. I don't think there were interior lights. I think it was just sunlight streaming in.
That's good to know, I guess, that it's all.
There's also a question from Motasham.
Motasham.
This is a good time.
Where's
Go
that?
ahead.
Hey, so my question is, as you had a vision from a young age, do you and you accomplished that mission, so you've become an astronaut and achieved your mission. What do you plan to do now? Do you make more visions, or do you just stop right there?
That's a great question. Yeah, no, I was kind of wondering that when I flew. All of this waiting, 27 years of waiting. And then I was wondering deep inside myself, is this the end or what? And the other thing that happened when I was in space was looking out at the blackness, I felt this almost like primitive urge to just go further, to like open the door and keep walking. And so I think that was like, felt like almost like an explorer gene in me turned on, and I heard like this voice, you just keep going. And so I came down more motivated than I ever have been in my entire life to do more space exploration. And so in a way, this was kind of just like an injection of new energy for me, and the start of a whole new chapter of like really doing some serious human exploration. So yeah, it's day one.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you for your response.
No worries.
When I talked about that, that's like how I feel all the time. Like I just like resonated with that. Like I just have this like pull in my stomach to go explore. I definitely understand. I think that's so amazing. Do you have any like projects or game plans of how you're gonna get back to space? Can you like let us in?
Well, I'm trying to reapply my old formula, which is to chop 2 zeros off the price. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, well, okay, what's the next challenge? And so I think launch is something that has been worked on a little bit. So I was very privileged to be able to be involved with Rocket Lab in the early days. And so that's one of the low-cost launch providers. And then you have SpaceX, which is doing marvelous things with Starship. So I think maybe I could trust that launch is a solved problem. So I'm asking myself the question, if I could launch anything I wanted, what would I launch? And for me, that would be a space station. I'm trying to work out how to build a space station for a better one than the ISS for 100 times cheaper. And that's my current project. So if anyone wants to jump on a call with me and just brainstorm ideas, I'd love to talk about that.
I say I got you for life support, and
yeah,
a lot of other people are excited to help you too. Liz, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. So my company, we work on gene therapies for longevity, and we've applied for a couple of the Tisch NASA grants. We have one of our projects in another university that's being looked at for this, which is radiation exposure. And we've got another one that we're interested in that would hopefully reduce muscle attrition or muscle loss in space. So I was wondering, from the point of view of somebody who likes to go to space, would you be willing to take gene therapies to be there longer if they were proven to keep you from having some of the detriments of the exposure?
Yeah, so that is a really good question, Liz. I probably would, but I think the more interesting part of what you propose there is there's more than one solution to the problem. So I remember the early 1970s designs for deep space settlements had, I think, like 1 million tons of soil or regolith as shielding to protect per square meter to protect the astronauts or the inhabitants of that settlement. I don't know if I remember the number right, but so some astronomical amount of wall was needed to provide the radiation shielding. But that technology that you described is an alternative answer. That means, we have to do some medical research. We're moving the research from how do you launch billions of tons of dirt to how do we do that safely so we don't have to do that. So I think it's a really cool idea, and totally something I'd love to learn more about. Yeah.
Very cool. Are there any other, maybe not directly, but tangentially related technologies that you're like really stoked about, Chris?
I was making a joke the other day with someone. They're like, well, how would you build a space station 100 times cheaper? I'm like, well, why not build it out of concrete? And I just said that as a joke, but then I was like, it's not a bad idea. And then I realized actually an even better thing would be to make it out of recycled plastic, because polyethylene is an even better radiation shield than stone and concrete and regolith is. So I was like, oh, what if I could take all of the world's unrecycled plastic and melt it in space and use it to build a wall for a space station? So I'm kind of trying to figure that out at the moment.
Ooh, playing with that one. I like that. That's cool. That's a cool idea. Rebecca, did you have a question?
I do. Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for being here. And I saw your presentation last week at the Overview Roundtable. So thank you very much. I have a question and a comment. I'm studying diplomacy, space diplomacy at Harvard University right now. And I was recently in like a seminar with space law scholars and space attorneys. And they were using Planet as an example of what to do for sustainability. They were basically elevating Planet as like the good example that they're doing everything the right way. And they had a lot of things to say about other companies who are doing things maybe not the right way. They're not really considering the whole world, but Planet has a great reputation. And I personally have done some writing on Planet Labs, and I was really impressed. You know, I study international human rights law as part of my degree program, and I noticed that your satellite imaging goes in and takes snapshots of the rainforest, and you actually can show preemptory activity for when they're getting ready to deforest, because your satellites can see the roads going in, which is illegal, and it's actually it's like a type of land grabbing also, if they go in and they're like raising the lands to for profit, and taking them from native people who should be entitled to those lands. So my question to you is, what is Planet doing right? Like, aside from what you just said about taking all the plastic in the world and making a wall for a space station, clearly this is your mindset. And so how can other companies, how can we copy what you guys are doing? What is the magic key there?
Well, part of it is, I often talk about the value of community. And I think Planet was born out of a very healthy and ethical global space community. And you know, I used to be involved with doing work with the UN and the United Nations and UNESCO and UN WHO. So we had this DNA of wanting to care about the planet and people already. And so we were very intentional in designing the culture of the company to support that. Because at the end of the day, you know, the culture comes from the founders, and in any team, it's called culture comes top down, right? Based on the behaviors that people observe that you're doing. And so one of the other important areas is space debris. And so my co-founder, Will, and a couple of our other early employees had been working on space debris at NASA, and we had a really good understanding of it. So we baked in absolute strict, responsible space debris behavior into our space operations from the get-go. And unfortunately, I don't see that in every new space company, because they didn't have the same kind of graduation that we did. They didn't necessarily learn that or be involved in that community. So they potentially are launching satellites in a less responsible manner because they're not sensitized to how important that is. So I spent a lot of time kind of promulgating that idea that you should, you know, you've got to be responsible at both ends. You can't be irresponsible in space, but then claim to be responsible on Earth. They're connected. So it's just really about being intentional about culture and having cultural goals and objectives for the company. And like the example you mentioned, the rainforest was one we really cared deeply about. Our very first picture back was from a managed forest in the northwestern part of the United States. It was a managed pine forest. But what was cool about that picture was it showed everything that you described. There were individual trees that we could count. There were roads, power lines, creeks, and rivers, areas that had been harvested, areas that had been planted, areas that were fully developed, and we could see it all in one picture. And I remember when we got that very first image, I emailed it to Will about 4 o'clock in the morning. He woke up at about 6, checked his phone, and he says he laid in bed crying for 2 hours looking at that picture because it moved him so much, because in that single image was everything we had stood for why we were starting the company.
That is amazing. And I can see how, you know, I currently in my studies also, my experience with the UN and learning from the UN has changed me as an American. Like I don't rally just for America anymore. I rally for the whole world. And I understand that we're a whole globe. Do you think that being Australian brought a different mindset for you?
Definitely. One of the things about having to travel overseas and connecting with this global space community was like, I kind of began my entire career with a global perspective, right? I was a guest in every country I went to and had to, you know, go to many workshops to learn, you know, what was important in those different countries. And there was a whole range from places like Japan and the US that have advanced space programs to traveling to other countries that had developing space programs and them trying to learn to do it for the first time. So yeah, I think definitely, you know, people can travel, or, you know, one of the things I regret not doing in my undergraduate was an exchange program with another university. I kind of had the opportunity, and I didn't think at the time, 21-year-old or me didn't really understand why that was important. But I wish I had gone on an exchange to another country, to a university, to spend a year there as well, to get even more of that, because I've now grown to recognize how valuable that is. And I just pulled up that first picture. I don't know if I can, can I share my screen very briefly here?
Please
I want to
share
show
it.
Yeah, that'd be cool to see.
Host has disabled sharing. If the host can.
You must have beat me to it by a fraction of a second. You should be good now.
Here we go. Yeah, so this is the very first picture that Planet ever took from space.
Beautiful.
And you know, it's great. You can see everything that you described there, Rebecca. So you know, I like the individual trees, and you can see the different areas and fence lines and little creeks and things. So yeah, if this was a rainforest and someone were to suddenly park 20 large logging trucks there, we'd see it. And you know, back to my point about code, you could probably even scan all of the Amazon automatically if you just write a little Python script to search for it. So that's something I'd love people to do.
That's really cool. I'm going to interject my own thoughts from everything you were saying real quick, Chris, but you talked about in the beginning where you just were like, it's a big decision. I'm going to go to space. I feel like in answer to Rebecca's question, you're like, it's a big decision. My company's just going to care about the planet. And that's the way it is. There's no question asked. We're just going to make that a priority. And I think that's a really powerful mindset that more of us probably need. As Mark mentioned, we are wrapping up soon. If there are other questions, please throw them in. But I also want to talk to you, Chris, a little bit about your side gig, which I find absolutely amazing. I think you're an amazing musician. Can you tell us more about that and how that's like rounding out this whole STEAM idea of engineer and creative? Can you talk to that identity of yours?
Yeah, I feel like for me, both things are connected. Like I was thinking about this morning, actually, because I was writing a song about my space trip. And there's something beautiful about songwriting where, you know, or any creative art, where you can take nothing or take some pieces and assemble something that never existed before. The art of the act of creation and just manifesting something that to your eyes is beautiful. And I feel that way if I write a song. When I get it right, I'm like, sometimes I'll be halfway through writing a song, I'll cry because I'm like, I know I got it right. I'm like, wow, this is really beautiful, and it didn't exist. And so in sort of humanity's continual fight against entropy, that's us like making art, right? That's what it is. And Planet was the same. Like, you know, I had the same feeling of just like gratitude and like completeness, just being able to create this picture that I showed you, and building a system, building a satellite that was really powerful and inexpensive, that could do really amazing things. And so working at Planet with the Planet engineers, designing this thing as an act of creative art is the exact same as for me as writing music. And so it's just really about envisaging something and kind of creating it. So yeah, it's just music is a really fun outlet for creativity, and I think it's a great way to reach more people. I mean, the space industry at the end of the day is actually rather small, and not everyone knows how space impacts their life, like that example. And so with music, you can reach more people. So I'm trying to maybe connect the two and lure some people over from music listening to getting involved in stewarding our planet.
I love that. Actually leads to one of my questions was, are you going to use your experience in space to influence your music? And that's like, so it sounds like you're taking all that experience and you're morphing it into your music as well.
Yeah, and pretty much everything I talked about today, I'm writing a song about. I have a couple of little songs I'm putting in an EP. It's taking me a little longer to do than I hoped, but that's sort of the way it goes, right? It'll come when it's ready, but I'm getting close now. So I'm trying to write about what it was like wanting to go to space and just having a dream. It's like you know, having a dream, but not knowing even when you'll ever get there. And because you know, that's sort of like the before I knew I was going to space song. And then there's the one of like what it was like and my amazing crew, and we didn't get to talk about that today, but I flew with a really amazing crew of people and I feel forever bonded to them. So I have a song about that, and that's really about just the human aspect of what we are doing as a species and why that's important. And then another one about the sort of the great challenge of like traveling into space and the sacrifice and the cost of that. So it's a little project.
That sounds like an amazing project. Matasham, do you want to go real quick?
Yes, just a quick question. So, Dr. Chris, what advice do you have for young students who have like aims of going into space or being an astronaut or just being involved with the space industry?
Yeah, so there's two great questions. On the first one, if you've made your mind up about it, I would just relax. It took me 27 years from applying to the Air Force to be a pilot and finding out I was colorblind through to actually flying to space. I think you can do it in half the time, but it doesn't matter, right? I often think, what would happen if humans like round numbers, right? So if I got to 10 years, I've been doing this damn thing for 10 years, I give up, right? Or if I'd said, I give up at 25 years. If I'd given up at 25 years, I would have been 2 years short of going. So I think it's just relax and, just keep working at it consistently. And sorry, what was your second question again? How to get involved?
How to get involved in space industry, like young students?
Yeah, there's a couple of really cool events. I mean, I don't know if you have any local organizations that are space societies, but a couple of really good things happen globally every year. One of my favorites is something called the Space Generation Congress, which is happening in Paris this year. It's always in the September-October timeframe. I think applications might still be open for this year. And that's how I met my global space family. Another one is, if you're in the United States or Canada, SEDS. I think there's a chapter in the UK as well. Yuri's Night, host a Yuri's Night party. That's a great way to lure in your fellow space friends and meet them. So April 12 every year, hosting a Yuri's Night party, but really just go to things to try and meet people who have the same dream as you, because that's kind of what I did. And once you meet them, you've now got a buddy to chat to and start, being creative.
It's a good tip too. Surround yourself with like people.
I do understand your point. Thank you once again.
You're welcome.
Well, Tasha, I just checked the time difference in Pakistan. And am I right that we started this at 4 a.m. your time?
Yes, that's correct.
That's amazing.
Dedication.
Yeah, fantastic.
Thanks for joining.
I was going to ask Liz if she wanted. Liz, if you come back, if you can hear me, if you have a question. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just letting the dog in. I was wondering, I really love the idea of used plastics to build things in space, to build things anywhere on the planet. Where are the advances in getting to space using less energy and less carbon footprint? Like, years ago, they talked about space elevators and, it takes a lot of energy to break out of the atmosphere. What's happening in that area? Are you following that? Are there any new technologies?
That has kind of largely been ignored so far. So that is an area of innovation. I know that the New Shepard vehicle that I flew on uses hydrogen that in principle can be clean because hydrogen just burns to create water. But you have to always ask, where does the hydrogen come from? So hydrogen can come from petrochemical sources, which makes it not clean. So you have to check that you're using organic hydrogen and not fossil fuel hydrogen. It's a silly joke, but it has the potential. If you use solar power to generate hydrogen, you can fly for essentially zero carbon impact. But that's not the industry standard right now. In terms of most of the other rockets, they're burning petrochemicals. So it's at the current flight rates, it's minuscule compared to aviation and car transport. But that's not always a good argument, right? If we want to live the future we want, where we're launching hundreds of times a day, then it's going to have an impact. So we do need to do some work there.
Yeah, good answer, good question. Well, we are officially over time. I know we've got a couple other.
That went by quick.
I know. I was like, well, if no one's doing anything, I got nothing going on. But Mark, can I hand it back over to you?
Yeah, absolutely. We had a few other great questions in the chat, and I wonder a lot of these things myself. And Chris, we wanted to ask you some big questions about, you know, where do you see us 100 years in the future? But we want to respect your time and everybody's time. So we'll just have to book another discussion sometime, I think. But thank you so much for coming. And I know it's a small group here, but what an international group and some great connections and so many little gems in what you were sharing that are going to be great to take back to other students and their teachers. So really, really just fantastic to have you. And thank you again, Bailey, for coming back and hosting with us. And thank you to everybody that came and contributed. Just fantastic questions from all over the world from so many different perspectives. So thank you, everybody, for being involved.
Thank you, Bailey and Mark, for generously inviting me today. So appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone.
Great to see you. Thanks, Chris. And great to see everyone.